The first page I'm going to show you was the first assignment for EdTech 502, which was the Internet for Educators. I really didn't have any idea of what to expect when I got into the class. And I was a little intimidated when I found out that we would be building our own websites using HTML coding. Looking back, I actually laugh at how much anxiety this initial page caused. I thought it was in way over my head, and there was no way I was going to be able to create a website using HTML. So when I actually got this live on the internet, I felt like Neil Armstrong must have when he set foot on the moon, which is kind of laughable now. But luckily, I had a very patient instructor, and I was able to slowly work through the projects for the class. As I progressed, my web pages did too. I was finally able to add some color and some hyperlinks, some containers, and different sections. Uh, we went from very basic HTML code to learning how to add CSS or cascading style sheets. And if we chose to, we could also make our own banners using Adobe Fireworks. We learned how to add tables and hyperlinks and several skills that are useful when looking at codes today. Even if I'm not the one who created them, I can understand the language and kind of troubleshoot that way. The final project for the class was a web quest, and for that I used a CSS design template. By that point, I understood enough about HTML coding to make modifications to CSS templates, and I found that the templates were more professional in appearance than what I was able to design on my own using CSS. I will say that as a result of the class, I'm much more comfortable working with coding in websites, which has helped as far as troubleshooting, even if they're not sites that I've necessarily built, but in working with WordPress and other applications, I can go in and make modifications because I do have that foundational understanding. I don't know that building websites is something that I would pursue as a career, but I'm definitely appreciative that I have that foundational knowledge that I gained in EdTech 502. The instructional design project for EdTech 503 gave me a new appreciation for the standard lesson plan. Prior to taking the course, I really had no idea how much actually goes into the instructional design process. We started with determining a learning need or goal, which involved a survey of students, staff, and subject matter experts. Then we completed an analysis of the learners, context, and task, which involved breaking down each of the learning objectives into individual steps. That process has really helped me with my regular lesson plans because it caused me to rethink the skills and knowledge needed for my lessons on a micro level and adjust accordingly. Finally, we considered how the objectives would be evaluated, and then we were able to start designing the course. My course addressed the basic skills needed for using computers, including how to send an email, internet safety, and things like using a mouse, turning on the computer, etc. One thing I really liked about EdTech 503 in the project was that it blended theory with application. Before we began the project, we looked into various learning theories and models of instruction when we completed the reading quiz. This helped guide the process because I chose a model that was right for the needs of my learners. Even though the instructional design process is quite involved and lengthy, I enjoyed the scientific and creative aspects of it. This is definitely an area I would like to pursue later in my career. I think one of the most overall helpful classes that I took was EdTech 506, which was graphic design for learning. I ended up being pretty happy with the way my final project for EdTech 506 turned out, although I would have liked to have more experience using some of the Adobe tools to create visuals. My limited skills meant that I often had to resort to modifying images that I found on the web available through Creative Commons or free clip art, and they're not as professional looking as I would have liked. Sometimes minor tweaks in the way an instructional resource is visually presented can have a significant impact on a person's ability and motivation to use it. One of the most startling examples in the text was the example of the space shuttle disaster, the Challenger, in the 1980s. The text shows that had information been presented in a more visual manner, the information might have prevented the accident altogether. For some reason, that really resonated with me. I think it really speaks to how important presentation is to instruction. Because I teach students with special needs, I've always been partial to supporting instruction with visuals. As you can see by the course website, I used visuals for the web page menus. I also tried to follow a simple layout for instructions using the principles of hierarchy and proximity. There are so many aspects to consider when it comes to visuals that it's sometimes hard to remember them all. I usually go by what I learned in EdTech 506, instinct, student response, and even today I still sometimes refer to the course text when I'm creating visual materials for my classes. I found EdTech 513 Multimedia to be a fun class where I got to explore various tools, including creating a screencast, podcast, a digital story, and learning about the contiguity principle. As an example of the contiguity principle, I'm using an old PowerPoint that I created a few years ago, which looks a little bit like a clip art file threw up on a slideshow. The information is pretty similar, but it doesn't really have a professional appearance. After learning about the contiguity principle in EdTech 513, I revised the same PowerPoint that I used for my classes and took away some of the text because too much text can be distracting. I also added some more relevant and professional looking visuals that I got through the Creative Commons. I did add speaker's notes at the bottom, which is not visual to students, and I believe that the revised PowerPoint is a lot more visually appealing and comprehensible. Another assignment that I really enjoyed was the digital story. This was more of a personal project for my niece, which I ultimately turned into a book for her first birthday. In the project, I documented each month of her first year in pictures, which correspond with rhyming words, so that it would be fun for a child to read with her parents. I'm still not an expert, but I'm more comfortable with creating digital projects that include audio, video, images, and so on. I learned that digital stories and other multimedia tools are a great way for students to express their creativity and understanding of concepts. Another class that I really got a lot out of was EdTech 541, which was integrating technology into the classroom. One of the projects that surprisingly I enjoyed most in EdTech 541 was the networking assignment. We were given a few different options about how to meet the objectives. I chose to visit our district's technology hub, and I learned a lot about how our tech department is structured and got a behind the scenes tour of our networking system. The pictures were taken with my phone, so they're not the best quality, but overall I left with a good understanding of the various systems and components involved with networking. I also really enjoyed EdTech 541 because of the resources I discovered for my particular content area. It was one class where I was able to apply what I was learning to what I was simultaneously teaching. I also discovered several resources that I was able to share with my colleagues and use with my students, mostly because we explored so many tools, including instructional software, spreadsheets and databases, presentation software, hypermedia, web-based learning, and several more. It really was rich with information, and I was able to take a lot of tools away and use them at the same time. Grant writing has always been an area of interest of mine, but I didn't really have a clear idea of a grant that I was interested in pursuing when I took the course. At the time I was teaching a reading course and my class had just received Chromebooks for student use. I came across Google Read and Write, which is an extension that helps students with fluency, comprehension, study skills, and so on. I wrote a grant to purchase the extension for 150 students at my school site. Although I ended up accessing site funding for the purchase, I did go through the grant writing process. I learned a lot about the different aspects involved with grant writing. I was able to take what I used from my grant and use it to apply for the funding, which I received. Now, 150 students receiving special education and English language services at my site are benefiting from the use of the Google Read and Write extension.